And in the first place, I would like to talk about economics. This question is in everybody's mouth. It's a very complicated situation which is growing more and more complicated. And I would like to say that now, as always in similar cases, the discussion centers on what is currently going on. Inflation, the exchange rates of currencies, the loss of people's savings and incomes. These are the basic issues. But it is difficult to see what is going to happen in Russia if we do not look at the roots of these phenomena. In the first place, as I see it, it is not only a Russian crisis, it's an international, global economic crisis which has roots outside Russia, in the West, and it's because of the fact that Europe and the entire world are going through a difficult period of transition from an industrial economy to an information-driven economy. You have to find new ideas and products of the human mind, and this is not so simple, especially if we want to preserve the achievements accumulated in the past 300 years. And I will tell you a well-known truth that in the past 300 years, the development of capitalism and the level of people's well-being and the gross domestic product per capita have grown by an order of magnitude, something which had never happened before. So we have to reckon with that. As far as Russia is concerned, the crisis in Russia, as I see it, which is striking hard today, did not begin yesterday. It began, as I see it, in 2006 or 2002 or 2003, and it was associated with a conflict between big business and the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy won, and it was lucky because at that time oil prices were growing, and they didn't have to think about further steps to advance market reforms in Russia. And if you were not admirers of a liberal economy, you were free from all obligations because bribes would flow into your hands with not much problem. And this continued until 2008 when those sources of well-being, which had a great impact on the restoration of Russia after the 1990s transformation crisis, ceased to operate, and new circumstances emerged. And now I believe that the Russian authorities are in a difficult position, in the sense that the methods they had used previously, or they had believed acceptable, would rule out continued reform and assumed that one needs to establish a tough regime that would assure the stability of power. I'm afraid I have little time, but may I just say that the relations between Russia and Europe, which began in a favorable climate, began to grow worse after the political regime was spoiled, and more signs appeared that the basic human rights and achievements of democracy would be pushed to the background or discarded at all. And the attitude of the West toward the Russia that emerged after the overthrow of communism as a brother that had to be helped, it turned into a feeling that this is a country of a different world, of a different world outlook, and a country with which one had to keep up relations and somehow influence its development in the interests of Europe and the Western world, but the planned approach to Russia as to the friendly country of the same world was discarded.
All those circumstances resulted in a situation of the crisis, but I think this is a global crisis. In the USA, the rate of economic growth is 2.5%, they say, but yet I don't think that the world has passed the major difficulties of the crisis. If we take other countries like China or India, we'll see that they advanced thanks to late industrialization and profiting by the previous achievements, major achievements that they had previously attained. And if we try and analyze the situation deeper, we'll see that the cultural differences that are present between different countries, major countries of the world and major civilizations, are related to the fact that some cultures are in favor of economic and social development, others hinder such development or are neutral to it. And I'm quite sure that the European culture, as a source of European culture per se and the culture of the United States of America, may be viewed from these positions, and Russia too belongs to the countries that have a huge cultural potential, and they can continue on the same route, preserving that cultural potential. Reforms of the 90s in Russia opened such possibilities, and I still have hopes in that direction. Unfortunately, today we have to admit that we have significantly stepped back from the possibilities of the past days related with the building up of a liberal market economy and a democratic political system. Unfortunately, the time was lost, and watching the crisis today, we need to take into consideration the fact that in Russia, on the background of the global crisis, we see a crisis which mostly resulted from the change of the political regime that took place then. Our oil prices are falling now, and all the strong benefits that seem to be working in favor of Russia and other developing countries previously have changed. And today we hear voices in Russia that we need to find somebody to blame. That is the central bank, for example, and Ms. Naviulina, the head of the central bank, who follows a treacherous course undermining Russian economy. In fact, the problems we're facing now are to a great degree political problems. They stem from the fact that there's a high level of distrust to Russia, and not only on the part of the Western or Eastern partners of Russia, but Russian citizens, first of all, in the first place, the people who earn capitals here and then withdraw that capital beyond the borders of the country. Now, a few words about the measures proposed by the government. For example, import replacement. To some degree, this import replacement or substitution, taking into consideration the fact that we really produced very little of high quality, so this may be a way out. But doing away with the crisis and bringing back the well-being that we had during the rich and plentiful years, this would not be enough. We need to analyze the gradual isolation of Russia from the rest of the world, where intellectual values are produced that give impetus to the development of technologies. Can we find an alternative to the development or other allies? We see that some attempts are made, steps are taken towards China and India. India is getting Russian liquefied natural gas now, so some steps are taken, but we need to make friends with everybody. And I'd like to draw your attention to the statement of the Chinese leaders recently, who said that they do not agree with Deng Xiaoping's words any longer, the words that we need to look for allies. We don't need allies, we need partners. Allies would mean that in some cases we would have to sacrifice our own interests to make concessions. We'll not do that. I do not think that analyzing possibilities for development, China, which is a great power and one of the sources of human civilization, is really a very promising alternative, because this is a different civilization, not a European one, and Russia has embarked on the European way of development. Well, we may recollect Peter I, who had good wishes, but Alexander II started reforms that turned the country on that way. But the road is very uneven, because imperial proud ambitions very often stand in the way and don't let us think about the interests of rank-and-file people, their well-being, their cultural potential, long-term basics for the development of the country. The proposals made by the government until recently, especially in 2014, practically they come to a way nowhere. And the latest address of the president, which seems to give hopes, which raises the issues of freedom of entrepreneurship, etc., might sound optimistic, but we'll see what it comes to. I'm sure that it's only on the road towards Europe, on the road towards market democracy and liberalism, does Russia have a good future.